The notification came in at 11:47 on a Tuesday morning, right when I was in the middle of a code review that had already been rescheduled twice. I almost ignored it. My phone was face down on my desk, and I had a rule about not checking it during focused work hours. It was a rule I had developed out of necessity, because I was the kind of person who, if I let it, could spiral down a rabbit hole of financial anxiety for 40 minutes over a single, unexpected charge. But something made me flip the phone over. Bank alert. Savings account. Withdrawal. $22,500. I stared at the number. Then I read it again. I set my laptop aside and sat very still for a moment, the way you do when your brain is processing something it genuinely cannot make sense of. $22,500. My emergency fund. The account I had been building since I was 23 years old, transferring $200 every single paycheck until it became something real, something solid, something that meant I would never be at the mercy of circumstances beyond my control. That account was my armor. I opened the banking app with hands that were already not quite steady. The withdrawal had been processed at 9:14 that morning through a branch location in Cincinnati. I was in Austin. I had not been to Cincinnati in 8 months. There was only one other person with access to that account. My mother. I want to explain something before I go further, because context matters here. When I was 21 and leaving for college in Texas, my father had added my mother as a joint account holder on the savings account he opened for me. It was practical at the time. He wanted to make sure that if anything ever happened to him while I was far from home, my mother could access funds to help me. My father was a careful, thoughtful man who planned for contingencies. He died 4 years later, when I was 25, and the account stayed the way he had set it up. I had meant to restructure it. I had thought about it a dozen times. But grief does strange things to your administrative efficiency, and then the years moved the way years do, and the account just stayed the way it was, carrying my father's intention like a watermark. My mother had never touched it. Not once in the 7 years since my father passed, which was the only reason I had never gotten around to changing the access. I called her immediately. She picked up on the third ring, which told me she had been waiting. "I was going to call you," she said before I could speak. Her voice had that particular quality I had known my whole life, the one that meant she had already rehearsed what she was going to say and had decided the best strategy was to move fast and stay just ahead of my questions. "I need you to hear me out before you say anything." $22,000, I said. The words came out very quiet. "Mom," she exhaled. "Your brother is in trouble. Real trouble, not the small kind. He took out a margin loan to cover the investment, and the market moved against him, and the broker is calling it in. If he doesn't cover by Thursday, they flag it, and it goes to collections, and his credit is destroyed. He will never recover from that, Maya. He is 28 years old. My brother was 28 years old. I was 31. For as long as I could remember, the gap between us had been measured not in years, but in the weight of expectation. I had been the responsible one, the one who studied, the one who got a scholarship, the one who built her own life from the ground up because she understood, somewhere bone deep, that no one was going to build it for her. My brother had been the one with potential, the one who just needed the right opportunity, the one who was almost there. "That money is not yours to take," I said. "I know how that sounds. That is my emergency fund. That is 7 years of savings. And your brother is your family," she said, and her voice shifted into something harder. "We don't let family drown, Maya. That is not how we were raised. Your father would have done the same thing." The use of my father in that sentence was so precisely aimed that, for a moment, I couldn't speak. She had learned, over the years, exactly where to put the blade. "Do not," I said softly, "bring him into this. I'm just saying what's true." "What's true," I said, "is that you withdrew $22,000 from an account that belongs to me without asking me, without telling me, without my consent. That is not family support. That is theft." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Don't be dramatic. We'll pay you back." I hung up. I sat at my desk in my apartment in Austin, and I breathed through the ringing in my ears. The sun was coming through the window the way it does in November in Texas, low and bright and indifferent. On my laptop screen, The code review was still open. Someone had left a comment in the thread, asking if I was still on. I stared at it without reading it. $22,000. I had $6,300 in my checking account and $22,500 less in my savings than I had had that morning. I ran the numbers automatically, the way I always did, a reflex I had developed from years of being the only person responsible for my own stability. I could cover rent for 4 months if I stretched. I could not handle a major car repair and a medical bill in the same month. I was, in the language that actually meant something to me, no longer safe. And then my phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email. The subject line read, Lease Guarantor Confirmation Unit 4B, The Meridian Apartments, Cincinnati, OH. I opened it with a feeling I can only describe as a door swinging open onto something very dark. It was a form letter from a property management company, addressed to me by name, thanking me for agreeing to serve as financial guarantor for my brother's new lease at a luxury apartment complex in Cincinnati. The monthly rent was $2,850. The lease term was 14 months. As guarantor, I was agreeing to be held liable for the full lease value in the event of default. That was nearly $40,000 of potential liability attached to my name, without my knowledge, without my signature. Except there was a signature. I opened the attached document, and there it was, at the bottom of the guarantor agreement, a signature that looked nothing like mine if you studied it, but close enough to pass a casual inspection. Someone had signed my name. I knew who. I also knew that she had not done it alone. I need to tell you about my brother, because you need to understand what I was dealing with. He was not a villain in the cartoonish sense. He was something more frustrating than that. He was a person of genuine charm and genuine intelligence who had never once been required to face a consequence, and so he had developed, over the course of his entire life, the sincere and unshakable belief that consequences did not actually apply to him. When he was 19 and got a DUI, my mother handled it. When he was 23 and got fired from his 3rd job in 2 years, my mother explained to everyone that the environments had been toxic and the management had been unfair. When he was 26 and the cryptocurrency venture collapsed, my mother absorbed the loss and called it a learning experience. I had watched this happen from a careful distance for years. I had set a boundary, quietly but firmly, when I was 25, and he had asked me to co-sign an auto loan, and my mother had stood in the kitchen, telling me it was a small thing, just a signature, it wouldn't affect me at all. I had said no, and the silence at the dinner table that night had been so complete you could hear the refrigerator hum. My mother had not spoken to me normally for 3 weeks, but she had never done anything like this. My father's savings account, my forged signature on a lease. These were not the quiet manipulations of a woman trying to smooth over a family situation. These were crimes. I closed the email and I sat for a long time doing what I do best, which is thinking. I am a software engineer. My job is to look at a system, identify where it is broken, and fix it in a way that does not create 2 new problems while solving the first one. I am not impulsive. I am not theatrical. I do not make moves I have not thought through. And in that moment, sitting in my apartment with the November light going cold across my floor, I made a decision that felt less like a choice and more like a load-bearing structure clicking into place. I was going to fix this, properly, completely, and I was going to do it in a way that could not be undone. I called my aunt first, my father's sister, the one person in my extended family I trusted entirely. I told her what had happened in 4 sentences, just the facts, no editorializing. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Tell me what you need." That was all. That was everything. Then I called a lawyer. Her name was Diane Cho, and I had found her 2 years earlier when I needed help with a contract dispute at work. She was compact, precise, and when she felt strongly about something, she had a way of going very still that was more intimidating than shouting. I reached her on the 2nd try, and I explained the situation the way I had explained it to my aunt. Just the facts. The account withdrawal, she said, is the cleaner case. Joint account, your mother has legal access, but we can argue unilateral misappropriation of funds, depending on the original account agreement. Do you have the original paperwork? My father had kept files. He had been meticulous about it. After he died, I had taken the box, because I knew my mother would eventually lose or discard things she didn't understand the value of. I told Diane yes. The forged guarantor signature, she continued, is more straightforward. That is fraud. That is potentially wire fraud if the document crossed state lines electronically, which it did. Has the lease been executed? I checked the email. The effective date was December 1st. That was 9 days away. Not yet, I said. Then we have time, Diane said. Here is what I need you to do. Do not contact your mother again today. Do not contact the property management company yet. I need you to compile everything you have. The bank records, the withdrawal details, the lease document, the signature page. Send it to me within the hour. I am going to contact the property management company's legal department and put them on notice that the guarantor's signature is disputed and potentially fraudulent. That freezes the lease execution. No legitimate property company will proceed with a forged guarantor while there is an active legal notice. And the savings account? I am going to draft a demand letter to your mother today. We will also contact the bank and flag the withdrawal as unauthorized. The joint account complicates it, but the circumstances create a strong case for breach of fiduciary duty. We want the money back in your account before it gets moved again. She may have already moved it. I know, Diane said. That's why we are moving right now. I spent the next 40 minutes pulling together everything Diane needed. I went through my father's file box, which I kept in the closet in my second bedroom, and I found the original account agreement. It specified that the account had been established for the benefit of the primary account holder, with secondary access granted for purposes of emergency support. The language was my father's language, careful and precise. He had not opened this account as a shared asset. He had opened it as a safety net for me. I photographed every page and sent them to Diane along with the bank alert, the email from the property management company, and every screenshot I had taken of my account history, showing that the balance had been untouched for years. Then I did something else. I called my brother. He picked up on the first ring, which meant he had been expecting this call too. Unlike my mother, he did not have a prepared speech. What he had was desperation, which came through immediately. Maya, before you say anything, how much is the margin call? I said. A pause. 22,000 covers most of it. How much is the rest? A longer pause. 6,000. So you need 28,000 total. I know it's a lot. And the apartment, I said. The one you're signing a lease for at $2,850 a month. How are you planning to afford that? Silence. I'm going to get a job, he said. And the words had the quality of something he had said many times before, without them ever becoming true. I have interviews lined up. I just need a place to land while I get stable. You signed my name to a legal document, I said. You or Mom, one of you did it. That is forgery. That is fraud. It was just so you wouldn't have to come in and sign it in person, he said. And I could hear in his voice that he genuinely believed this was a reasonable explanation. We knew you'd say yes eventually. We were just speeding up the process. I would not have said yes, I said. I have never co-signed anything for you. I told you that 6 years ago, and I meant it. You have so much, he said, and his voice shifted into something younger, something practiced. You have your job, your savings, your apartment. I'm not asking you to give it away. I'm asking you to help. That's what family does. I did not respond to that. Instead, I said, my lawyer is contacting the property management company today to flag the forged signature. The lease will not go through, and the bank has been notified about the withdrawal. The silence that followed was different from the earlier ones. This one had a texture to it. Maya. His voice had gone flat and careful in a way I had never heard from him before. If that lease falls through, I don't have anywhere to go. That is not my problem to solve. Mom is going to be devastated, he said, switching tactics. You know how she is. She did this for me. If you do this, if you make this into a legal thing, it's going to destroy her. She destroyed something too, I said. She destroyed the last thing my father built for me. I hung up. I should tell you that I cried after that call. Not for long, and not in the way people cry when they are defeated. I cried because I was sitting in my apartment 3 states away from the only family I had, and I had just drawn a line that was going to cost me something I could never entirely calculate. I knew it the way you know things that don't require thinking. My mother was not going to forgive this easily. My brother was going to spin a version of events that made me the villain. There were cousins, aunts, family, friends who would hear his version before they heard mine, and some of them would believe it. But the crying did not last long, because underneath it was something steadier, something that had been building in me for years without my quite recognizing it. I wiped my face and went back to work. 2 days later, on a Thursday evening, my phone started ringing in the way it only rings when something has been organized. First my cousin, then my mother's sister, then a woman from our church who had known my family since before I was born. Each call had the same shape. Alice, your mother is beside herself. Your brother is in a very difficult situation. We know you're upset, but family has to come first. Is there any way to talk this through? My mother had made calls. She had assembled her people. She was doing what she did best, which was manage the narrative before anyone had a chance to examine the facts. I said the same thing to each of them. I am happy to talk this through in person. Tell my mother to let me know when and where. The meeting happened on Saturday at my aunt's house, my mother's sister. I drove 2 hours to get there. When I walked in, the living room held 6 people besides me. My mother, my brother, my aunt, 2 cousins, and a family friend named Mr. Hutchins, who had been my father's business partner, and was apparently now serving some role as a neutral mediator. My mother was sitting in the armchair nearest the window, which I recognized as a positioning choice. The light was good there. She looked composed, her hands folded in her lap, her expression arranged into something that communicated wounded dignity. "I'm glad you came," she said. "Of course," I said. I sat down in the middle of the room. I had my laptop bag over my shoulder. Mr. Hutchins leaned forward. He was a man in his late 60s who believed deeply in the resolvability of problems, a faith I had always found touching and occasionally useful. "Maya, we're here because your family loves you, and they are hoping you can find a path forward together. Your mother has explained the situation with your brother and the financial difficulty he's facing. We're wondering if there's a way to—" "I want to make sure everyone has the same information," I said. My mother's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. I opened my laptop. I had prepared 3 things. The first was a PDF of the account agreement, with the relevant language highlighted. The second was the bank record showing the withdrawal. The third was the lease document with the forged signature, laid next to a copy of my actual signature from a legal document I had signed 3 years ago. I turned the laptop screen so the room could see it. "My father opened this account for me in 2012, I said. He specified in the agreement that it was established for my benefit, with secondary access granted for emergency support. The language is right there." I pointed to the highlighted section. "On Tuesday morning, my mother withdrew $22,500 from this account and used it to cover my brother's margin call." I let that sit for a moment. My mother did not ask me. She did not warn me. She did not tell me until I called her after receiving the bank alert. When I called, she told me my brother was in trouble, and that what she had done was what family does. I scrolled to the second document. "This is the lease guarantor agreement for my brother's new apartment. This is my supposed signature on that agreement." I pointed to it. "This is my actual signature." I pointed to the other. "Someone signed my name to a legal document making me financially liable for nearly $40,000 without my knowledge or consent. That is forgery. That is fraud." The room was very quiet. My cousin Deja was looking at the laptop with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Mr. Hutchins had sat back in his chair. My aunt was looking at my mother. "It was to help him," my mother said, and her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it now that had not been there when I came in. "I did it to help your brother. Not for me. For him. Because he is my son, and I was not going to watch him lose everything while I had the ability to act." "You did not have the ability," I said. "You had access. Those are different things." "Maya." This was my brother, from his spot on the couch. He looked worse than he had sounded on the phone. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his left knee was bouncing with a restless, anxious energy. "I know this is bad. I know I put you in an impossible position, But I need you to understand. This wasn't some scheme. I was desperate. The margin call came in and I panicked, and Mom was trying to help, and neither of us was thinking clearly. If you weren't thinking clearly, I said, you should not have put my name on a legal document. It was temporary, my mother said. Just to secure the apartment while we figured things out. We were going to tell you. When? I asked. After the lease executed. After I was legally bound to 14 months of a nearly $3,000 monthly rent on an apartment I had nothing to do with? She did not answer that. Here's what I want to know, I said. I looked at her directly. You have a retirement account. You have equity in the house. I know this because Dad showed me the financial documents when I was in college, because he wanted me to understand how financial stability was built. Why did you go to my account instead of your own resources? The silence stretched. That is our future, my mother said quietly. We can't touch that. I let that land. I watched it land on Mr. Hutchins, on my cousin Deja, on my aunt who was still looking at my mother with an expression that had gone carefully neutral. You could not touch your future, I said, but you had no trouble touching mine. My mother's composure cracked. Not entirely, not dramatically, but I saw it. A tremor in the jaw. A too quick blink. You have so much, she said, and her voice had lost its steadiness now. You have your career, your apartment, your savings. You have never needed us the way he needs us. You have always been fine. He is not fine. He has never been fine. And maybe that is our fault. Maybe we made mistakes. But he is still my son, and I am not going to apologize for trying to keep him afloat. I have so much, I said, because I built it myself. Nobody gave it to me. Not you, not anyone. I worked for every dollar in that account. And you took it while I was sitting at my desk in Austin, 3 states away, without even a phone call beforehand. You made a decision about my money, my name, my liability, and you did not ask me because you knew I would say no. The room was very still. That is not family support, I said. That is what you do to someone you do not respect. My mother started to cry then, real tears, which I noted without being moved by them the way I once would have been, because I had spent enough years watching those tears function as a redirect to understand what they were for. Mr. Hutchins cleared his throat. Maya, what would it take to resolve this? What outcome are you looking for? The money needs to be returned to my account, I said, in full. The forged lease document needs to be withdrawn, and the property management company needs to receive written confirmation from me directly that I did not authorize the signature. My lawyer has already put the company on notice. That process is already in motion. I paused. And I need my mother's access removed from my account. My mother made a sound. That account was my father's gift to me, I said. His name is on the original agreement. Removing her access is not punishment. It is what should have happened years ago, and I am sorry it took this to make me do it. My cousin Deja stood up. She was 2 years older than me, and we had been close once, before our lives had diverged in the way adult lives do. She walked over to the coffee table and looked at the laptop screen for a long moment, reading the signature comparison. Then she looked at my aunt. Auntie, she said carefully, did you know about this before today? My aunt shook her head, very small and very deliberate. Deja looked at my mother. You asked me to come here today to help convince Maya to drop this. I asked you to come to support the family, my mother said. You asked me to help you pressure her, Deja said, without telling me that you forged her signature on a legal document. She picked up her phone. I'm not doing that. She sat back down, but now she was sitting closer to me than to anyone else, and the geometry of the room had shifted. My brother put his head in his hands. Where is the money now? I asked. The $22,000. It was wired to the brokerage, my mother said, to cover the margin call. It's gone. Then you need to find another way to return it, I said. Maya, we don't have $22,000 just sitting. You have a home equity line of credit, I said. I had done my research, the way I always did. You took it out in 2019. You have not drawn on it significantly. The available balance, as of the last statement my father's estate attorney shared with me when we settled the accounts, was approximately $40,000. The silence that followed was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of someone realizing they had underestimated who they were dealing with. "That is our emergency fund," my mother said. "Yes," I said. "It is." I let her hold that understanding. I did not say anything else. I did not need to. Mr. Hutchins was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, with the careful voice of a man who was revising his understanding of the situation he had walked into, "It sounds like what needs to happen is clear. The question is the timeline. My lawyer has given a formal deadline of 10 business days for the return of the funds," I said. "After that, we pursue legal remedies. The forged document is a separate matter that my lawyer is already handling independently of whether the money is returned." I closed my laptop and put it back in the bag. "I love you," I said to my mother. And I meant it. That was the most complicated part. I love you, and I will love you when this is over. But I will not be the account you draw from when he needs rescuing. Not anymore. Not ever again. My father did not build that safety net for me so that it could be emptied for someone who has never saved a dollar in his life. I stood up. "Maya," my brother said. He looked up at me from the couch, and for a moment I saw something in his face that I had not seen before. Not the desperation or the calculation or the helpless charm. Something more like recognition. Like he was seeing clearly, maybe for the first time, what the pattern of his life had required from the people around him. "I'm sorry," he said. "I actually mean that. I'm sorry." I looked at him for a long moment. "I know," I said. "But sorry doesn't put $22,000 back in my account. Figure it out." I walked out into the gray November afternoon and sat in my car for a few minutes before I started the engine. I was not crying. I was not even particularly shaking. I felt, more than anything, like a person who has been carrying a weight they had gotten so used to that they had stopped noticing it and had just set it down. The legal process unfolded the way Diane had said it would. The property management company, upon receiving her formal notice of disputed signature, immediately froze the lease execution and reached out to me directly. I confirmed in writing that I had not authorized the guarantor agreement and provided the comparison signatures. The company withdrew the document, and my brother lost the apartment. He moved into a room in a house with 3 other people in a neighborhood 20 minutes from my mother's house. I heard about this from Deja, who had started texting me again in the careful way you do when you are rebuilding something. My mother drew on the home equity line. The $22,000 was back in my account within 8 days of our meeting, transferred with no accompanying message or explanation. Just the wire. I confirmed receipt and sent a single text. "Thank you." She did not respond. I had the account restructured the following week. My father's name remained on the historical record, the way you cannot erase a person from the things they built for you, but the secondary access was removed. The account was mine alone now, the way it had always been intended to be. There was a conversation I had with my aunt in December, about 3 weeks after all of it. She called me on a Sunday afternoon and asked if I wanted to come for dinner, and I said yes, and we sat at her kitchen table, and she made the soup my father used to love, and we talked about him for a while, which we almost never did as a family, because my mother found it too painful, and had, over the years, made his absence into a kind of silence. "He would have been proud of you," my aunt said. "He would have told me to fix the account access years ago," I said. She laughed, the kind of laugh that carries some grief in it. Also that. My mother and I reached a kind of functional peace over the following months. Not warmth, not the easy telephone calls we used to have. Something more honest than that, and more painful, and probably more durable. She stopped asking me for things related to my brother. I stopped waiting for the apology that came in fragments over time, never quite whole, but present in the way she spoke to me differently when it was just the 2 of us. My brother got a job, a real one, finally, at a logistics company that a friend of Mr. Hutchins had connected him with. It was not glamorous, and it paid less than he thought he deserved. But he showed up every day, and he kept showing up, which was more than I had ever seen from him. Deja told me he had started going to Gamblers Anonymous. I did not ask for details. That was his work to do. On the day I hit $50,000 in savings, I did not tell anyone. I was sitting at my desk in Austin, the same desk where I had read the bank alert that had started all of it, and I opened the banking app, and I looked at the number for a long time. It had taken me 2.5 years to rebuild from the point where my mother had left me, factoring in the returned money and the months of disciplined saving after. $50,000. Enough for a down payment on something, eventually. Enough to be safe. I called my aunt, and we talked for an hour about nothing in particular. She told me about the soup she was planning to make, and her garden, and the fact that the neighbor's dog had gotten into her flower bed again. I did not tell her the number, but I told her I was doing well. And when I said it, it was not the performance of okay that I had gotten good at during the hard years. It was a plain and unremarkable fact. I was doing well. I had built the floor, and I had defended it, and it was mine. That is all the story is, really. Not a tragedy, not a triumph. Just the account of a person who learned, at 31, that the people who love you can still take from you, and that love and accountability are not the same thing, and that you can choose one without surrendering the other. My father understood that. He had tried to build it into the architecture of the account he opened for me, the language of the agreement, the careful intention of a careful man. I kept the original paperwork, not out of sentimentality, though there was some of that. I kept it because it was the document that had saved me, because a careful person had written the right words in the right place, and I had put them in a folder, and the folder had been there when I needed it. Some things you build for protection, and they hold. That is what restoration means. When you do it right, you find what was intended. You strip away what was covering it, and you bring it back to what it was always supposed to be.